once the book is written, how the reader interprets the book, it now becomes reader's own book. So I guess. So what made you write this particular book?
You know, I often say that this book was always there with me. This was the first book I ought to have written before I wrote a book called Platter of Gold, which is at least 4 or 5 years old now. This is like a prequel to that. And it is in a trilogy of books. This would have been first. So why did I decide to write it? I probably decided quite a while ago. The reason's probably not so relevant now. I think the reason was because I was shocked the day I learned so much about Operation Legacy. But the rest was just information that I needed to put in. So the destroyed history part I didn't know about. And when I found out back in 2000, just before COVID, I started this project. So that would be 2020, I think.
Yeah, correct, yes.
Yeah, it was actually March of that year. But I had made the decision before, but I started it then. Yeah.
Before I ask you to read something struck me. Aduke, one of our foremost historians, you quoted it in your book by saying the absence of written records does not mean the absence of history. Now, I think on a first reading, I took that to refer to the fact that a lot of African, and in this case, Nigerian history is oral history, right? So you could interpret it like that. So the absence of written records doesn't mean there's an absence of history. But also in respect particularly to Operation Legacy and the stolen records, the missing records, how does that quote also apply to those two?
The second part of the question was what?
So you can assume, my first reading of
yes, I got
okay. So now the stolen records, the missing records, are they still part of our history even though they don't exist?
I see the connection. All right. To answer the first part of your question is yes, I really liked that Professor Kenneth Dike's phrase. It's one that I often think a lot about. But if you pause for a moment, the fact that we do not have as much written history as the Europeans, yes, first of all, obviously means that now it's obvious to us that doesn't mean that we didn't have history. But the point to be made is actually sometimes the reason not writing our history in Africa isn't an omission or some neglect. It's a deliberate thing. Many of you say it's oral history. It's even deeper than oral history. It's actually that some of our history is trapped in our souls, in the greeting process of certain families and people all over this part of West Africa. And so nobody writes down, it's now because we don't know the words properly, but nobody sits down and writes the hailings of a chieftaincy family in Chukwu. Nobody writes it. But the person who knows it has taught the person who has taught the person who has taught the person. And it will never be written. So they often make it seem as if, you've now told us that sometimes you used to write. No. We always wrote, sometimes before you even started writing, in Europe. But we sometimes did not write at all, even when we could, because there are things you do not write. The beats of a talking drum, do you write the notes of that? But whereas in Europe, the customary that they did.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's also, our history is also hidden in our names.
Absolutely. Yeah.
In our names and also in
names being part of greetings as well.
Yes, and in our art.
Absolutely.
But I'm going to ask you to open and tell us about what Operation Legacy is.
Operation Legacy is.
What?
It still is. And I can explain that. The whole concept of migrated files means that Operation Legacy is still going on. Now, should I read a portion that describes what it is? I think I'll find that pretty easy. Yeah, okay. Well, why don't I talk about the process?
Yes, please.
Right at the beginning. Many our East African subjects might even have answered themselves with a shrug of the shoulders, not knowing that history was being destroyed, literally being lit up in flames. The scheme, that's Operation Legacy, the scheme for the operation, for the sea operation, was a bit more elaborate. Crates of records were taken out to the sea, and the records were to be packed in weighted crates and dumped in very deep and current-free water at maximum practicable distance from the coast. Clearly, the intent would be to ensure the weighted crates and their contents would never be discovered or recovered. History was being drowned. Okay, no, let me just go on a bit more. A couple of years later, in 1963, a jumbo jet landed at Gatwick Airport in London on a late autumn morning. It was carrying crates of files from Kenya administration, discreetly moving them out of public view in utter secret. History was being concealed. And there was literally a system where, as the colonials knew they were departing from about 1950, they sped up a process that they had been doing since the beginning of the colony, which was to ensure that only the good things about their administration that were on record would be left behind. Some would be so bad that they needed to be burnt on location. Some they couldn't just wait, they just drove them into the air, sailed them into the sea and dumped them. And some made their way secretly to England. And nobody knew about, well, everybody suspected that this was going on, but nobody really knew for sure because the UK government had never admitted to having it. It was so bad that in 2011, when the 5 Kenyan litigants took the UK government to court in London on the Strand and sued them for the atrocities committed in the detention of the Mau Mau, the secrets, well, not so secret, but the society that was determined to claim Kenya land back from the colonials. And the treatment that was meted out to them, many died, many were kept in solitary confinement, and this was their life, and they wanted compensation for it. But in order to get compensation, they had to prove that it happened. And foreign minister after foreign minister was called in to come and to answer select committees on parliament, and they just lied that they didn't exist. Until one day, a chap called, I think it's Michael Hague, the former Tory leader, was given an ultimatum that he would go to jail if he didn't answer categorically. And so in Parliament, he stood up one morning and said the files, 1.2 million records belonging to 35 countries across Africa had been hidden in a secret location belonging to the MI5 in an area of Richmond. Many of you know Richmond, just outside Surrey, in a compound, and they'd been there for 50 years. And yes, lo and behold, the number of files were there. So many files from Nigeria as well. And some of us don't even know that this operation happened. Talk less of knowing what documents those documents are, and whether we're even going to, we're not even demanding for it. Kenya has been demanding for these records for near on 25 years. No.
2009, I think there was a lawsuit,
Yeah. No, the lawsuit, and then the Kenyan government started asking, Mau Mau was proscribed, ironically, by Jomo Kenyatta, a Mama operated himself. So when he got independence and he became the prime minister, and it's all in the book, he then proscribed Mama. So Mama couldn't go to court because English courts would not accept process from a banned organization. So it was when Kenyatta died, the new prime minister just said, well, this is ridiculous. Why are we banning something that we forced to get? These guys, they saved our backside. So he unbanned it. And that's how come this law firm, Ile-Ife, took the case up in the High Court. The compensation was not the issue. They just wanted to be recognized. And the pictures are here. Of these it's called Mitsui and Foreign Commonwealth Office. It's a law case, but it's also a piece of journalism. And I thought this story needed to be told.
Yes.
I thought this story needed to be told. It's being told elsewhere. The scholars have been digging up and doing all sorts of investigations around it. So there's a lot of literature from the scholars. And Bosse will testify to Professor George. Oh no, hands up. Those are the scholars, and they're the ones who lead independent people like me to then say, sorry?
No, I'm just saying what they're saying.
Yeah.
They say the sound is muffled, so I just want to...
I am muffled. Is that better?
No, they're saying maybe try not using the audio device.
Not using it.
And seeing if the device might be.
And then I would have thought that the computer would carry it.
Okay, yeah. Well, can you confirm if it's okay?
Computer.
Continue.
They say it's okay.
Well, they will shout out. But I think that let's talk about numbers. Because when you say documents, I mean, is it a room this size?
Oh no.
What million? Yes.
No, 1.2 million records. Records doesn't mean a document. Records could be a whole box. Do you understand? 1.2 million records in this location alone. There's no guarantee that there isn't another location. It took us 50 years to confirm that this one exists.
And it's not one file.
And so it could be
5 or 6
and it's
files.
highly unlikely for an intelligence organization like Ile-Ife to keep it all in one place. And now, mysteriously, it's also in the book. If you try to, when I went to press, okay, even after they were released and given to the National Archives in Richmond, just around the corner from where they should have been in the first place, and all of a sudden they pulled it off the catalog, and there's a big sign there's a big sign for you to get information somewhere. And the general gist of it is that those files that are called FC 1.1, remember that? And FC 1.1, they were infected by insects.
Oh, okay. Yes. Disinfectant process.
The process of disinfecting the documents is what's going on.
And it's dangerous for human health.
Yes, it may be dangerous for the reader. Talkless of the people who are going to disinfect.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly.
So what does FCO mean?
Foreign and Commonwealth Office.
Oh, foreign.
So in the National Archives, they will give you file reference, but the acronym at the beginning will tell you the nature of storage, the nature of the entities records that they are. Foreign and Commonwealth.
But I think what I think is actually genius about this book is the way clap and rub his ego a bit so that he will spill more secrets. Is the linkage between the stealing of the documents and the looting of our art.
Yeah, okay, so while the book talks about Operation Legacy as a modern day phenomenon, my theory in the book is to suggest to the reader that Operation Legacy is just a species of the same process that started with the stealing of artifacts. That artifacts are as much records as paper. And Operation Legacy is actually modern day looting. So they are complaining about what was done in our case, 1897, what was done every odd year all over Africa. Okay, everybody has their own 1897. But while we were focused on saying, you know, bring back these physical objects, this same nature of looting was going on in 1957 and 1960. So I link them, I say that this book, that's why the book is called Operation Legacy, Looting and Losing Africa's Kingdoms. And linked to that also is the intellectual looting.
Yes.
The intellectual looting was done to us through colonial education, which was our first contact with any sort of education. And so we were then taught, actually physically taught, that history was a European thing. And we just were just barbarous information of what we used to do to kill ourselves to eat.
Because we are
now, it was a group of Africans led by Kenneth Dike, Diop first, Chiok first, and then Ali Masri, Aduke Gomez, and Professor David. So when they came back from England, they then switched their thinking. It was led by Kenneth Dike personally, who got first class in his university in England, in history. He said, that we will no longer use European references to interpret our history, and that we will start looking at other things beside books till we find where to understand more. And so this whole Africanist thinking that we now talk about freely, Chop's book is called Civilization Originated in Africa. And his book was banned because in 1947, black people didn't write those kind of books. But as up until early last year, New York Met had dedicated the entire exhibit for a period of about a year to that same title, Civilization Started in Africa. And those things were not acceptable in 1922 and 1930. It's just nobody said that. And so that's what I do in the book. Is I talk about the looting of the mind, the looting of the artifacts, and then the looting of the documents, which was codenamed Operation Legacy, and how we discovered it. So very
yes, please read.
But to just make you understand the concept of the looting of the mind, I trace it back to when in the late 1700s and early 1800s, Europe's state of scholarship then was referred to as the era of enlightenment. This was the early Darwinian times, so they thought they had the answers to everything. And that's when the seeds of looting of our mind occurred, because they were then literally teaching people that black people were inferior to white people. And they were giving scientific explanations as to why that was so. But you would imagine that sort of behavior should have died down. So in the introduction, I say to everybody that I hope in this book you'll be able to relate to this theory that I have said, and that you will understand why we should look at our history, not just with sympathy, but understanding how races became convinced of their attitudes. There were scientific reasons, anthropological reasons that had been set up by the brightest minds in Europe. Leo Furenius, who was a celebrated archaeologist and anthropologist, all right? He came to Nigeria and made a dig in Ife, and they discovered several sophisticated figurines. This sort of thing that had now probably been done, and they were looking at it in about 1052 or 1020 something. And he just said, oh, this must have been where the lost civilization of Atlantis came to. And so these things were done by the Greeks. No wonder we couldn't find them for so long. They were here. Because this looks like their work. Because he could not accept that this could have been done by black people. This is the 1920s. And then Leo Frobenius, till now, is celebrated as one of the greatest minds. So I then say, I hope when you read this book, you'll have been convinced. But I close by saying, but there's doubt, because even till now, people still have these things. And this is what I say. Hopefully, we will all by this time, the time we finish the book, admit that because of its damaging effect to Africa, we should all agree that never again should this triple tragedy be repeated on any continent. And I've told you about the triple tragedy. Today, however, not everyone is in agreement with this summation. Even today, no less than Boris Johnson, the then Member of Parliament and later Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and is neither right now. So, he doesn't seem to agree. He writes, when he writes, and I quote, Africa is a mess, but it is simply not credible to blame colonialism. The continent, Africa, may be a blot, but it's not a blot upon our conscience. The problem is not that we were once in charge, but that we are not in charge anymore. The best fate for Africa would be if its old colonial powers, or their citizens, scrambled once again in her direction, on the understanding this time we will not be asked to feel guilty. Yeah, because then he then captures this 18th century thinking, and he shows it as it's hale and hearty and alive today. Sorry.
When you talk about civilizations, okay, in Africa, when we were at school, Longo Park discovered this, Longo Park discovered that. But I was actually, the place that I did get these peoples from was reading about the caves in Ondo. So in the caves in Ondo, there's evidence of human occupation for 16,000 years. Why don't we know more about these caves?
Okay. All right. So when the book was more or less finished, I then embarked on the project to do a documentary of the book. And so some of the places that I had written about, I actually had to go there for the filming of the documentary. So, silly me, I'd written about Igboku and Nok in southern Kaduna, the most friendly place to wander around is the night. Silly me, I had to go to these places. I never made it to the cave because I felt, in the documentary that is, we felt that, and the documentary is called The Loot and the Lost Kingdoms. It's not called Operation Lagos, it's called The Loot and the Lost Kingdoms. Because we found that the skeleton head of a 16,000-old West African that had been found in the cave was now in the dust cupboard in the basement of the University of Ibadan. So we had to toss up. Are we going to go to the cave and see some cave? Or am I going to go and meet my 16,000-old ancestor? 16,000-year-old ancestor. I think you know what we chose. So we went to look for the skull. Now, we had some friends and we knew some people who knew some people. So, especially in the academic community, I had to know making moves to the head of the department. And we spoke and he said, yes, yeah, we'll go down and take a look. And we'll go down and take a look, don't worry. And then he was telling me more and more about his work. And then which is fascinating, fantastic things. why the University of Ibadan gave enough respect to their departments of history and archaeology. So when we then were going downstairs and we saw some people carrying cameras and tripods, we said, "What's that?" And we said, "We just want the food." And then a whole new discussion started because they weren't ready for that. But they did laugh, they did let us know. And we'll be able to see it on screen when the documentary is released. But the point is, the point is well taken, loaded inside that question. We don't know that the remains of the oldest West African human remains found to date are in the dust covered basement of University of Ibadan. We don't know that. We don't even talk about it.
How is it kept? Did you see it?
Well, it's not on display.
Yes.
Now, the decision, and I really respect it, the decision not to put it on display is because even things not this rare and valuable have been pilfered, taken away and destroyed, and not deliberately, just trying to pocket it. So it's kept in a locked place. But why does that have to be the case? Why can we not have a secure place where we can go and take some national pride from the fact that it's not just in the Rift Valley in East Africa that they find ancient. That's me and my great grandcousin.
I also thought it was meaningful that it's all over. There's Nok in the north, there's Ile-Ife, there's Ife, there's the caves. But that research, particularly in the caves and elsewhere, it was interesting because also ancient life wasn't thought to have happened in the rainforest. To that.
Yeah, and this my two heroes in the book is a guy called Bernard Fagg, F-A-G-G. He was a Cambridge graduate, and we profile him in the book. A Cambridge graduate who just joined the colonial service and was sent out as an admin officer, not as an archaeologist. He studied archaeology in Cambridge. He was sent up and he ended up in a place near Jos as an assistant DO admin. So he wasn't using any of his skills, he was just hanging around. And somebody found what it looked like the head of a monkey. And they were just playing with it and toying with it. And the guy called Colonel Ross, who was also a civil servant around the area, knew this guy in the southern area of that province. That was an archaeologist. He wanted him to see it, and that's how Bernard Fagg literally switched jobs and appointed himself archaeologist for Nigeria, and dug this whole area and found what is now known as the Nok terracotta. Okay, now we call them Nok terracottas only because the first find was actually in Jama, but it's actually the more better known one is the one in Nok. So where the first figurine was found is now the name of the civilization. The civilization's name probably was not Nok. We don't know what it was, but archaeologists are convinced that the timing, the sophistication of the instruments, and the level of heat that you would have to bake clay into, literally an oven, to be able to do that in the 9th century, means that there was a high intelligence walking around this part of the world. And they found commonality between Nok, Igboku, and Ife. So this, I thought it was good to bring this into the mainstream. This is deep archaeology, written in journals, and many clever people have done this and have done the research. But it's not open for you to. So I thought this is ridiculous. We must know this. We must know that the glass found in Ife Because glass is unique. Glass is made from quartz. Quartz has something very similar to a thumbprint or a fingerprint. It's unique. So you can test where this glass came from. Now, in Europe, the headquarters of glass, ancient medieval glass, is Venice. Okay? When they found, when they did the teeth, there's a clever guy called Gerard Schwann. He's in Nigeria right now. He comes and goes to France, he studies in America, he teaches in America, and he is still principally, he's digging in Ife. They found glass that predates Venice, meaning that they were making glass in the 11th century, in the 10th century, in West Africa. That's heating something to 1,000 degrees centigrade. The same thing their cousins were doing in Nok at about the same time. They were baking stuff. So the heat generation wasn't a big deal to these people in a hot country. Heat generation, we thought, came out of necessity to some guys who were feeling cold. So these guys were using heat just to have a nice time, just for fun. I mean, where are these guys? Why come they didn't meet us? I mean, how come the link was lost? To the point where, and that's what, those are the questions we ask it. Oh, sorry. This same technique is found in Nok, Ife, and Idogu. Now, anybody who has even the roughest idea of Nigerian geography will tell you that these are not neighboring towns at all. Do you understand? They're not neighboring towns at all.
And to walk.
Yeah.
I mean, how long would it be to walk?
A documentary has just been made on those sculptures, and it turns out that it was actually from different villages. It wasn't one place at all.
No, at all. But in fact, before he left, dug a whole radius of the area.
Up to Sokoto.
Yeah,
And Katsina.
yeah, and found this same
No.
tendency. It's ridiculous. So how big was this kingdom? I mean, how big was this kingdom if we are thinking certain practices had changed hands? Or was it kingdoms that had given themselves knowledge because of trade? Do you get what I mean?
But before the colonials came, you know that the Atlantic Ocean was called the Ethiopic Sea. So because what people know as Ethiopia today, they think that Ethiopia
No,
was
much bigger.
It was a lot bigger.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also, what is also interesting about Nok as well is that from your book, I learned they are supposed to be the first people who did agriculture.
Yeah.
And again, it's not something that is known. And
Irrigation, like agriculture. Not just throwing something in the ground and covering it and growing it. No. They realized that dry places needed to get water. And they had found ways to move water from a waterful place to a waterless place. For food. And the dating is there because the shards have been investigated. What archaeologists do is they validate historians. But history is so vast that for you to dig so often and so many times to validate every historical opinion, it's not possible. But when there's controversy such as the beginning, early civilization, what did we know? When did we know it? Who knew it? And we're not claiming that maybe Africa is the only place that had civilization going on at that time. But before Kenneth Dike's time, we were taught that we didn't. We didn't have those civilizations. There was no Songhai, there was no Mali, there was no Kanem, there was no Ghana. Not this Ghana, I mean the Ghana. No Ghana.
no Ife, no Oyo.
Yes, nothing of the sort.
And that ties into the stealing. The stealing of memory, the stealing of documents.
Stealing of documents, stealing of memory, stealing of artifacts. They were all one transaction over a very long period of time. And they were all intentionally created to superimpose a civilization over another in order to gain superiority and sustain imperial colonialism.
Because if we didn't have any history and our artifacts are just objects, why were they looted?
Yes, well that's a question I asked in the book as well. But you see, the looters were not the ones who appreciated the value of what they did. They just saw some one leopard, one dog-looking structure, and that's this one. Oh, at the last dying days of the Benin expedition, they hadn't found the king, and it's in the book. They hadn't found the king, but they were going to chase him everywhere till they found him, because he hadn't died in the raid. But before they left that area, Benin itself and the palace area, they piled all the loot out into the courtyard. And Ralph Moore, who was in charge, Major Ralph Moore, Consul General at the time, he directed all officers to take a pick and take two things of their choice, and they took. This is as told by Ralph Moore. I didn't make this up. And he took one for the Queen,
Yes.
and took one for the Prince of Wales.
And it's still in there.
Yeah, it's still in possession of the family till today. An ivory, a solid ivory, jewel-studded leopard figurine.
Big, life size. If you go on the website, you can see
You see, it was given to the Prince of Wales.
It's stunning. It's absolutely stunning.
So these things, when they say taken from the all belong to the Oba, no, it wasn't the Oba's palace alone. The records show it wasn't the Oba's palace alone. It was everybody of prominence who had artifacts, and only people of prominence would have these things. These were not pieces of art. They were pieces of our spiritual identity. Many of them were on a mantle, an altar, for them to use when they needed superhuman power.
And also, they were records as well.
Yeah, and they were history.
They were archives.
The Okuko that I talk about, why am I saying so much inside? But you got it.
No, try.
The Okuko, the cockerel.
The cockerel.
Okuko. No, you see, there you go. It's the same word in Igbo, it's the same word in Yoruba, it's the same word in Hausa. So you pronounced it.
It's the way we pronounce it.
Say it.
Okuko.
Okuko. In my name, you say Okuko.
Oh, amazing.
And it's literally from the sound.
Yeah.
Anyway, Okuko was not just a bronze, nice-looking piece of art. The cock, it was in memory of a cock who had future-telling skills and was able to give warnings about disasters coming to the empire, and successfully guided successful and successive kings to successful tenures. And then you steal it and say, and he kept it in the dining room of Christ College in Cambridge.
And it guided them.
Because one of the officers, that's what he took. And when his son was admitted to Cambridge, he gifted it to Christ College.
And they thought, oh, it's a chicken, we'll put it in the food hall.
Yeah, in the dining room. So,
But something, I want to just go back quickly to gloves, okay? Because it's something struck me, like with vaccines, okay? Now, vaccines are good things, yes. But what do we know as the history of vaccinations? Where did it come from?
well, as part of the theft of your intellect part of the book, I talk about traditional medicine and the immunizing effect of using the disease to cure the disease is an age-old West African trick, and they've been doing it for centuries. And it was accidentally documented that it was ancient tradition.
Okay.
Okay.
The audio is a mystery. The audio is a mystery. That's it.
The audio is mischievous.
Okay, yeah, so the question is regarding the stolen artifacts records and so on that capture so many dimensions of history and identity. What do you think of the Chinese approach? So as we know, Africans are not the only ones whose relics and material culture was looted. One of the things that some people do is they go to Sotheby's and they join the auction. What do you think? Very interesting approach.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. That certainly, it reveals a different mindset of, I'm going to take the matter into my own hands and not leave it in the hands of somebody's benevolence. Because there's no way, short of starting some sort of nuclear war, there's no way you can force a European country, particularly when it tells you it's in private hands, private property. The New York Met is owned by the Roosevelt family. So, how do you want me to force them to give them a private property? So I think it's unique, and you need to start thinking about things like that outside the box. Some nations have gone to try and steal them back. Ireland, testified, they used to go back and take their house the same way. Yeah, so that might be an option. Maybe with all the guys that we have who do all the robbing in Nigeria, we can export them to somewhere in London and drop them there in the museum. They're all in bed. Don't bring them out.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, sure. Can I come over?
Yeah, please come over so that they can see you online as well. The camera is there. In fact, I'm not the one they should use. They should come behind us here so they can see you. Just stand here.
Okay. All right.
If you see yourself, then you know.
Okay, sure. Maybe I should take on the camera.
Yes,
Is
better.
that right?
Beautiful. Take it out
Yes,
there.
so that they
So
know
we
your
can see your
face.
Facebook.
Okay, that's right. Right. Thank you, sir, for the kind words and the kind thoughts as well. I've learned they stole our memories, they stole our artifacts, they stole our documents. Perhaps not talking about the natural resources which is still ongoing. So I'd like to ask, and my question is there any some sort of consensus now that we're aware the consciousness is there? Any consensus in the African ecosystem, for instance, to consciously, deliberately, intentionally see how we can find a way to get rediscover who we are as a matter of fact? Because it seems to be some things so to us, like you said, an exchange for who we are. Is there anything, any consciousness, any platform on the African continent to find a way to discover who we are, perhaps? That's my question.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
And then Hamza.
Thank you. Okay, so I haven't read the book, but from other books, really impressive. But this is the question I have. Now, moving away from the victim, some people might say victim mentality. Yes, the history, but what about the future? What is the responsibility that us as Africans, maybe we should even make it Nigerians, what are we doing in terms of going forward to consciously see that? Because every day is history. People are still eating one way or the other. And part of the explanation that a lot of government will say is that who are they giving it to? When they do give it, what happens to it? We all realize that in this situation, this time around, even if they return some of these artifacts, how do we know that, okay, they give it to, are we talking about the royal houses? Are we talking about the government? How do we know that the same minute they drop it, the next day it doesn't go out? It's very, so what are we doing? It may not be a question itself in terms of what our consciousness now going forward. I just want to say, I've been reading Supo's books and following what he's doing. I think it is so critical for us to chase after who we are. Because I think the global view of the African, including our own view of us, is where we get the deal wrong. Now, there's a word that we've been using, colonialism. And I had a meet in Abuja about 4 or 5 years ago. And when we started discussing colonialism, some young people started crying and breaking down because the word is used so casually, colonialism. But I think maybe perhaps, especially Supo, such a researcher, maybe the next book should be on what this word colonialism actually means. And maybe that's a good way of putting pressure on these people. When people understand the genocide and the way that people were lost, it was an invasion, it was a takeover of the body and of the mind. So blood was spilled. So I think perhaps sometimes when people just use the word colonialism, people don't understand that people were invaded and raped and pillaged and killed. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
And then I'll give you Alex to answer on the one.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. 2 questions. First, it's not a question, just an addendum speaking about how to get artifacts back. In Olasupo set forth at dawn. I don't know for people who have read it. Olasupo under Obasanjo's first regime, he went with a fellow professor. The head, there was the Moemi head, which is missing. The head was in this billionaire's private collection in Brazil, and he went there to steal it. Just so that you know that there's he went there to steal it. He actually stole it, but found out that it was a fake head. It wasn't the genuine one. And then he traced it and found it in the basement of the British Museum. Wow. But of course, there's an addendum that Obasanjo was actually going to use the opportunity. So Olasupo had gone there to steal it. When he found out it was fake, he was in his hotel with his other professor, and we were waiting for an extraction. I don't know if you guys know what extraction is. And they found out that Obasanjo had actually called the Brazilians and told them that there were 2 professors who have come to your country to steal the Moemis, go and arrest them. So when Olasupo came back to Nigeria, and I think it's TM Aduke, I can't remember his initials correctly, who was the one who organized it all, went to Obasanjo and said, how could you do that to us? And Obasanjo said, you know you're my enemy. You know I'm a military man. You gave me an opportunity to get rid of you. Do you blame me for taking? So that's my way. So the second one I want to talk about is about, I understand about the roots and our identity and all of that. But when we focus so much on the past, which we're supposed to do, what about the present and the future? I was actually waiting for the other gentleman who was speaking. I thought we were going to cover this. I went to Benin 2 months ago, and I went to Igon Street, That's where these things were carved.
Yeah.
The whole street is now full of beer parlors and brothels and all of that. So my question is, have we lost the artistic ability? We focus so much on the past. But how can we not encourage the people that are here and now to keep on creating these marvels? Why do we just not even see this place? How many people know of it? I was trying to get my friends to come here. Nobody knows about this. Nobody knows about art. Nobody celebrates it. We want to collect these things and bring it to us. That's a question we have to ask ourselves. It's enough to focus on the past, now, and the future is what we have.
Okay, our host, so we can't refuse him. Now,
I forced my way up there.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I just wanted, because it's got to do with what he's about to say. I'm sorry if the questions back to back, I'm sure it must be tough for you to even remember what we're talking about. For me, it's 2 things that I want to capture. Firstly, just like they have said, this issue of colonialism, where does it end? And how do we get our mind to being productive and not being distracted by all that's going on around us? And I remember that you and I sat with the Irish ambassador, and he laughed and told us that whatever you think you suffered in Nigeria, it's nowhere near what we do. But they have found a way to, move themselves forward. And it's quite an impressive story, if you remember, sir. Now, if you look at that, and then I think about, okay, so which country didn't go through colonialism in Africa? I think it's Ethiopia. And I'm like, maybe that's why they have a functioning here now. Maybe.
That's the one.
I'm happy I'm here, so somebody enlightened me. So, but I keep trying to think, okay, how do we, what's wrong with us? Why can't we move forward? We all know this story. A lot of us know this story. But like I said, how do we celebrate it? My position is that it's not about what we went through. There's nothing happy, there's nothing joyful about that. But it's about the milestones that we've been able to achieve as individuals, as peoples, and all of that, and how to connect all of that. But by and large, I'd love to hear your opinion as in how do we move forward, just like you said. Thank you.
I think both of these two questions relate with the last speaker and the first person. I'm more concerned about the future and this victim mentality. The idea is, I mean, who to give it to and what do they do with it. So I think the future view, I'll deal with it with the last two comments. As in, why do we keep talking about the past? But who to give it to? There is a law called, I think it's the Monuments and Museums Act. Yes, that declares certain antiquated material culture national property. Now, it has a year cutoff. My memory serves me, I think it's 1918, something silly like that. It's a silly number. And it just leads you to think that some of the artifacts that we're talking about, even by our own law, the national property. Why is it so? There's a rationale. I don't need to agree with it, so I'm not giving you my view. The rationale is that they would have become so notorious and so known to the general public that you cannot say the Idia mask belongs to a family, that it is now part of our national treasure. It's the same way oil in the ground, instead of belonging to my family, that who owns the land, you say it belongs to the whole country. That's the structure we live in, whether you like it or not. But there's a lot of sentiment that's gone around this particular trove of the Benin looting expedition. That people are just saying it belongs to the family. I think it needs to be thought about. I really think it needs to be thought about. Because, as I've said, historically it's proof to show that it didn't come from one person's house. But then, in Benin culture, everything in the whole empire belongs to them. But we need to think about it. And it's not the thief's right to ask me the question. Absolutely. People say it's another anti-British. It's not. I'm very Anglophilic. I'm very, very British in many of my habits. I love Britain, but I don't like the government in the history and what they did. It's just different. There was a government, and what they were doing was wrong. It has nothing to do with British people as a general. Do you understand? And this government, as Jude rightly said, I think it was Hamza that said it, was a military government. Let's not forget it. We were under military rule. It wasn't because some of them were wearing suits. They were soldiers, and they were ruling us by force. And they were not involving us in the laws, so they were giving us decrees. If you like it, they sit down, a lot of other Europeans, and they decide something without me. Say decree. So, I mean, I couldn't have described it better. What Africa has gone through, it's really bad. But, is it an excuse for where we are? No, it's not. And I think I'm dealing with the future question now. It's not an excuse, but it is context that you need to understand. So when you tell me why is this place not organized, and why do these people not know who they are, go and ask yourself that question, because it's not my doing. All right? So you had a head start because nobody has done this to you. So it's very painful. We have to talk about the past. I can't accept a situation where it is a liability to what the future will be to talk about the past. I don't accept. I'm sorry, we can debate it from now till midnight. I will not agree with the fact that the past, because it's past, is no longer necessary. What are we doing about the present and the future? It is the past that we're doing about the present and the future. Because the past is so important. They were making industrial salt in Badagry, all right? Before the Common Era, what you call BC, before Christ.
Wow.
Industrial salt. There are shards that they have dated. You know, so it's, when you know that, your chest expands a bit. You adjust your chest and say, this is who I am. That is priceless. We're already in trouble across Africa for the way that we behave. Nigerians. Imagine if we knew our history, that they would shoot us on sight. They think this is arrogant. They think Nigerians are arrogant now. You know? And I'm sure many of you here know about the CBD and other alphabets that have been found across Africa. Of people so that people did write.
Some people don't know. Maybe that those people don't know because they don't know. Quickly. It's an ancient way of recording that is found. The evidence of it has been found all over the Eastern province. Okay, it's very hieroglyphic-like. It's similar to hieroglyphic.
Say it again, what's the
And it looks like hieroglyphics, except you can still tell some characters that are not pictures. You can tell that they're proper characters. But they used it to write their history. Yeah, and nobody talks. Yeah, exactly. Nobody talks about hieroglyphics. Egypt has been so romanticized. They've forgotten that Sudan predates many of the pyramids found in Egypt.
And all the pharaohs were blacks.
So the tragedy is the first statue you see when you enter British Museum is a bust of a Roman emperor. But because it's done in white marble, you think, oh yeah, well that guy even looks like Caesar. The black guy.
He is a Caesar.
Yeah.
He is a Caesar, but black.
I think I've done colonialism. I can't talk about the description of it. It was a heinous scheme, and it looked so benign, and that it went on for so long, and it's still going on.
Yes. But what I was saying,
Heinous crime.
Nobody has actually delved into that work and explained to people. So you see the shock on people's faces when they understand what it was. People just use the word and they don't understand.
Yeah.
They think that the whites came to come and show us the way.
Cricket,
as opposed
dancing.
Yes, that's important. So I'm going to reach out to you and I'm going to pressure you on that one.
Go ahead. Bring it up.
But people might not have known colonialism, the young ones, because history was discontinued. Teaching of history was discontinued in our schools.
But I'm saying even the way that it was taught. If you go to some of like, if you go to the museum, the first time I found out about how that knowledge when I went to a museum in Ghana.
I think somebody asked whether there was a concerted effort. Yeah, whether there was a concerted effort towards the return. Is that what you're asking? Okay, well, I mean, I'd like to answer that question from a rather tangential point. The concerted effort is on so many areas that resolve itself and point towards the return. In 1968, or thereabouts, maybe also correction, I think 68, the UNESCO did what it had commissioned a couple of years before, what's it called? General History of Africa, GHA, and assembled this bunch of people I was talking about, these boys I was talking about, who came back in the 40s, first class degrees, Kenneth Chike, Ali Masri, Ali Boahen, all of them. In fact, I think Diop was still alive. Check Diop, the guy who I said wrote the book, Civilization Started Now. And these guys were huge brains, and the task was to write the general history of Africa. So the first time, we were now actually, that's what trickled down to many of us who schooled in these parts, that we now started seeing Mansa Musa and Sundiata. It was the effort of UNESCO and these brains who came up with this general history of Africa that said all our empires and civilizations irrefutably as a matter of historical study, and it entered the curriculum. And that's how some of us even have an idea of these ancient, the routes to Tripoli through Goa, and the salt trading that used to go, and all these wonderful, Goa was a huge place. And so that's a concerted effort to know the history. It's from the knowledge of the history that you can demand the return. So that was the first concerted effort. But you know, a concerted effort came from outside Africa. The French government commissioned a book, a study. I think they assembled, in total it was led by 3 academics to study where the African artifacts are all over the world. And in summary, their conclusion was 90% of this material was outside Africa. And so the history, the collective memory of Africans wasn't even on their continent. Now, this was done in 2000, and Macron's effort was Macron. So that tells you how long ago it is. It's not that long ago. My guess would be 2019 that the report was submitted to him. And it was damning, and it was based on that they started to act about their own return. Because the shame in that document that was commissioned for Macron to even be interested and to put a presidential committee, he deserves credit for. You know? So those are the things that are leading to the return. I think the discourse around it is louder than the machinery of a group of people who are, writing letters. There are many tangential things that the clamor. Hopefully, a book like this. I have colleagues, my BBC friend, Barnaby Phillips. He's written a book on loot. It's a marvelous book. My other friend that did a book on the British Museum. Yes. Professor Hicks.
Let's go online quickly. We have some questions. What is your view on Gazette?
Please,
thank you.
What is your view on Gazette by former president? Do you think we need to unlearn, to relearn, and appreciate our cultural artifacts?
Yeah, I believe this, the question is talking about the Gazette. I think Gazette number 14 or so, of this year. I can't remember the number of it. The Gazette in which the president authorized the return of the loot to the Oba of Benin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on, I want to see if there's any more questions.
I think that's what the question is asked. What do I think about the Gazette? It's an executive order. I'm not sure the president had the right, had the power to make an executive order on that subject, because it's already covered by statute. The law is you cannot give executive orders on areas that are covered by statute. Otherwise, you are becoming a legislator as well as a president. It stands to reason. Executive orders are to implement things that have already been written. You can't write a law as a president. So I'm not sure about the legality of it, but it's gone to the Oba. But we must note that it's gone to the Oba as a custodian. And we all know custodians are trustees. Trustees always have beneficiaries. So that shows that, I hope that's not missing in this whole transaction. Because if I give you something in custody for some beneficiaries, the owners are the people of Benin.
Yes, the beneficiaries.
Yeah, so we should be be careful. Maybe they need to translate executive order number 14.
Okay, you said, do we need to relearn, do we need to unlearn to relearn to appreciate our cultural artifacts?
I'm afraid we do need to unlearn some things. And I suppose in the process of learning, you cast doubt on what you had before. And so the process of unlearning is as seamless as learning itself. So once we are exposed to the correct information, the history and the culture and the heritage of Africa, we will immediately dismantle our previous knowledge, if you can call it that, what we had been taught about what we was supposed to be and who we were supposed not to be.
Back to physical. I think you had a question. Last three. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, one. When you contract, so we'll add that 4. Yes. No. Okay. Yes. Jude and Jumoke. Yeah.
So
Yes. Please.
I keep being late, so I don't know if this was covered. We spoke about loot by Barry Phillips. There was a story he had about the museum, as we know. It was started by a British man, British archaeologist, I think. I don't know if you, so I'm just going to share that. So this British archaeologist came to Nigeria and started a museum, and this museum that we know about. He went around the world, went to the British royal family, and got them to return some of the loot. They did return some of the loot, and that's what we used to start the museum. So we had, I think he was the first indigenous head of the Nigerian museums, Yeah, so one day he gets a call from home that General Yakubu Gowon was heading to the museum. He was going on an official trip to the UK, and he was heading to the museum to get a gift for the Queen, and he was going to get the gift from the museum. So Ebo raced to the museum before him, got there and started hiding all the artifacts. But obviously, they couldn't hide everything before the Oba came. And Gowon came. And when Gowon arrived, he went around and was looking at them and picked a bust. And that bust he picked to go give to the Queen was a bust that the Queen had given to return back to Nigeria. So you can imagine the embarrassment. So it defeats that argument of, because when we return these things, you guys, that's their argument. You guys do not appreciate what it is. You think, no, I know, I'm just giving you that. But the point that we are going to them is, I'm just at the end of what I said before, that there's just a 1% of us, 1% of us that really appreciate what these art forms, and that's why I asked the question on before. Now we still have sculptors, we still have smith and blacksmiths, we still have them here, it's still working. Nobody's patronizing them. We are focused on what has been taken, not what is being created. I was with Victor exactly. I'm Wale Ajayi. This Wale Ajayi, I'm not sure if I have his name correctly. And they have huge galleries. And you go there and it's empty. No, just only the rich, the 1% that understands this.
We're trying to feed ourselves.
I understand. Yes, I do. I understand that. So what I'm saying now is about that sensitization program that has to start from the grassroots and build it up. You go to a hotel, you go everywhere, you see all those carvings and everything. They'll tell you it's only when that buys it. We Africans, waiting the reason for. We don't do firewood, abacha stone. You know what I mean? So I understand, I'm not defeating the argument that he has brought here, but I'm just also asking, let one tell one. Let one push it further, that we bring people to theaters where they can actually confront art and appreciate art as it is.
Hold on.
Thank you. Just to sort of agree and also disagree with what you said, is that let one tell one, for sure. And the way to do that is this. So write a book, support the book. If we can't write the book, we support the writers of the book. We support
More writers.
Support the writers. So I thank you for this, by the way. Thank you very much for this event, and I'm so happy to be here because I love the questions. There's so much conflict about how we move forward. And I think the consensus I want to know how to move forward. So the moving forward is on a very personal level. I think we can agree that most of the people who've inspired us in the course of history have been either a little mad, right, or a little rich, or a little backed by someone rich. This is my consensus. That you have to be a little crazy to move the bar, you have to be a little rich, or you have to be able to access the people who will fund your madness. Because it takes a bit of courage to do some of these unusual things. And I think that that's where we start to move these pins forward. Victor Hikameno is a great example, and I'm happy you mentioned it because Victor Hikameno's gallery is not empty. It's full of very, very expensive art. Yes, but even the way, so let me paint a picture of how it works with the rich. So the rich fund and back the artists and the creation, and then the artists can fund programs, they can fund the books, they can fund the discussions, because we can't be everything. The billionaire can't be here, but he may fund this program. Right? to reach a million students. To reach a million students, I don't even know one place in Lagos that can accommodate a million students for a month. So there are infrastructure issues, but again, it's also that we also have to find the things that work for our context, our country, the fact that there's traffic, the fact that you can't just branch off from Onikan. There are like 6 or 7 places we can be here, but you can't do this even on a Sunday. I can't say I'm going to the museum, I'm going to Freedom Park, I'm going here. There are 5 different things that I could be at today, but you can't. So it's about us also maybe giving ourselves a bit of credit that yes, there is trauma. Yes, it has to come from the individual, largely. Our society is not going to, we're not going to have a government that's going to help us. It's you and me. The question you've asked is in itself a challenge. Your question has challenged me. Will 1 tell 1, 1 tell 5, 1 tell 100. That's our intervention. This is the intervention. This afternoon is the intervention. That's just what I think.
My question was about in relation to something you said earlier, like how British came and gave us Christianity and the Bible, and the unlearning of aspects. I feel like, so it may be a long question, but there's a lot of denying of African culture and art and artifacts. So does that play a part in opening people's minds to why it's so important to preserve our history? The fact that there's so much stigma around, as you said, I can't pronounce them correctly, chicken. So this chicken was a sightseeing chicken. Some people, they would not be, oh, this is juju, it's this, but there should be a point where you can look beyond the juju. You don't have, I don't believe in sightseeing chicken, but I can appreciate the culture and meaning behind it. So my question is not like, how do you unlearn, how do you accept that yes, you have your different faiths, whether you're a Christian, a Muslim, but how do you have your faiths, but you also still accept that your history, what is your history? Yeah. Your ancestors believed in the sightseeing chicken. Your sightseeing chicken should be respected and in your house, not in Cambridge. Yeah.
All I wanted to do was make a comment about how, when somebody
but you need to come here, otherwise we won't see you online.
So what I wanted to do was just make a comment about this art and how somebody mentioned about do we still keep focusing on the past when we have now and tomorrow. But the fact that it's Wimbos who are coming, foreigners with dollars, who are coming to appreciate this art because they've reached a certain level of sophistication. And that goes back to how sophisticated we were to be producing that artwork at that time. So the poor man is busy trying to survive. He can't go and buy painting. Painting is not his priority. No, I'm just talking generally for everybody to understand. So
Our journey is just starting. And that's why that history, that past, how we got to where we are today, is so important to bring us to where we're going to. I have conversations with my peers, and I'm almost 60 now. And some people think that we're just useless. They've been so indoctrinated. We've been sent to school in England or going on holiday there and seeing all the wonderful things that are there, and they just think that we are useless. But there's trauma. There's trauma here. There's trauma in the Caribbean. So it's not easy to. And there's discrimination, and there's oppression, and there's self-esteem issues as well, and opportunities that are not given to us. So our journey in Nigeria is such a journey. It's the burden that Nigeria has. It's such a massive burden. And I'm glad to be in this kind of forum because it's starting. People are becoming woke, I think is the correct word. Is that not the right word? Woke? People are becoming aware. Sorry. So that's basically what I'm saying.
You know, I got a lot of sense of people's frustration with the keepingness of these valuables and how it should be kept, and the tragedy of sometimes the story about the Phillips Bruce in his book. And there are other stories that are equally horrifying of kings building new edifices on palace grounds, smashing down previous buildings, raising the multi-story building with central air conditioning. That is happening. I mean, it's horrifying. But you know what? Archiving itself is a culture.
Yeah.
Archiving is a habit. Keeping things is a way of life, particularly when that duty is recognized by the public authorities. Do you get what I mean? We all can keep things in our own way, but there is an overwhelming obligation on the government to have the correct attitude towards archiving. And in archiving, I'm talking from records all the way up to physical objects. But we've lost that culture. You know, we've lost that culture. That's how you can go to this museum and you'll be upset with the way things are being kept. Or you will find things in the most obscure places. There is a bronze metalwork sculpture of Queen Elizabeth at the age of, I think, 29. And she just become, so she was in her 30s. That was done by Hemon in his studio in Chelsea. She sat for him to do it. She doesn't sit for portraits on a whim. And she sat in the studio in the 50s. That statue was used to adorn the front of the Parliament building here in Onikan. You know, this was Parliament. That was the it was a House of Parliament in those days. It wasn't National Assembly. It was the House of Parliament, and it used to be there. It is now, because when they took over the first coup, they knocked it off because it was a symbol of democracy, and it was found its way into the museum hands. It is in a dust cupboard, kept with vim and a pocket and a mop.
Yes.
Do you understand?
It's actually also damaged.
So yes, it is. So the culture we need to grow culture of archiving in all public institutions. And you know, there's a story that I can't know the person. A story that a friend of ours tells us that in somewhere in the East, the chief, because of the high level of adoption of Christianity in the East, high level in spread and intense in just fervence of adoption of Christianity. So they told some people to bring out all the old things that their parents have been keeping in the cupboard, all these figurines. And they came that they are satanic, and they burned them. All of them. They were burnt. So when Hamza says the journey is just starting, it's far. This is just how far away. They burn their own local heritage. Because the Bible said that they should not keep. a wrong reading of the Bible, I must say. I'm not even justifying it.
So, interesting comments online as well.
So, and then who we are. I can't. I did a short TED talk on that whole subject of who we are, and who we are is part of this documentary, and it probably doesn't feature as much in the book as it does in it. And that question still agitates because the result of Operation Legacy is that it gives us an identity that is false. You know, we have been told, somebody said, we've been told that we are useless. We cannot organize ourselves. We do not know how to write history. We do not have sophisticated ancient civilizations. You know, the same bubonic plague that happened in the 1600s, famously in England, happened here as well, and everybody did that. What did they use to survive? So we've been given an identity that's not ours, and it can be very tragic. And that's the importance of conversations like this, but the importance of the whole question of preserving, recovering, and then preserving, and then creating a body of archival material that belongs to all of us.
So, sorry, Echo has a question and then
It's not really a question, comments. Thank you, Shivo, for this book. I think it's wonderful. And while you were talking, I just remembered a quote. People without the knowledge of their history and their roots, you know, it's to not have that knowledge of your history and roots, it just means that you're not, well, I guess moving forward as you should. So it's important that we know. And what you said is so true. We've been told that we're nothing, we're useless, and all of that. And knowing our history, knowing that we had glass, even back then, it gives you, yes, makes those shoulders go up higher. It makes it possible for you to be a part of the conversations. The world has sort of relegated Africa to this continent where there's always a need to help because we know nothing. Meanwhile, we are the beginning of a lot of, I believe, of civilization. We started and know a lot of things, and we should be contributing to that global dialogue. But we've been pushed aside, and we've allowed ourselves to be pushed aside. So perhaps if we knew more about who we are, what our history is, and all those beginnings, it would give us, you know, those shoulders raised, and we can then contribute to that conversation with a lot more confidence. And it is necessary because we're crying, our young people are crying because they do not know who they are. They think that they're part of, people always say to me, what did I do that I was born in this country? People say it. You know, what did I do that I was not born in the United States or somewhere else? But you know, we have to teach them that it's important that you were born here. You're important, you're relevant, you're unique, you're different, you're special. And we have been special for centuries. So thank you again for this, you know, revisiting history. I love it, and thank you.
So, and this is the last, and then you can respond to them online, and then we'll call it an evening, and then we'll ask him nicely if he'll sign books.
Yes, please.
We can't thank Mr. Shasore enough for this presentation. Echo talked about the younger ones not knowing their identity, they're lost. You all will agree with me that our traditional fathers who ought to be guiding us, they themselves are lost, they're confused.
Yes.
Because a lot of them have adopted the guest religions, and they are not really custodian of our traditions anymore. So where do we go from here? You know? We should try and know ourselves, we should try and hold on to who we believe we are. But yes, I can do it. How do I help these younger ones? I give after-school classes as a volunteer at an NGO in Surulere. And when you are talking to these children, they're looking at you like as if you are from Mars. you know. I've started and I said, listen, I asked them to write an essay. They could not give me any example, an essay, on my ideal career. Well, they gave me their careers, their ideal careers, but they could not give me an example of a Nigerian practicing that career right now. They will quote American this and so. Which way to go? Which way to go? I could see from their compositions that their parents helped them. These parents could not give them the examples. Instead of giving them examples of Nigerians, they gave them examples of foreigners. So really, that made me very unhappy. Very, very unhappy. So how do we do it, please? Like Yoruba, we say, "Ono abayoda." How do we do it? Where do we go?
I was just looking online, and I think at DMC, Razan Kuti, saying the promotion of through films like Black Panther and The Woman King, and such efforts to educate on a mass scale. And it is so true. It is so true. The work that Hollywood does in defining and shaping the world culture. First of all, shaping the exceptionalism that is called America. We've accepted that there's something exceptional, and it's a myth. But there's American exceptionalism is a given now, and Hollywood is a great tool in shaping who they were, and then convincing the world that who they were was something that we should emulate. And we can't be intentional enough with our filmmaking. But unfortunately, regrettably, we don't have, I guess, the same policy thrust in our Nollywood and Nigerian filmmaking and some films like maybe Ego can educate us. But there is actually the reverse. We're not revering anything that is uniquely African, like Woman King and Black Panther. We're actually depicting the very worst of our world. And I love literary freedom and creative people's ability to grow. But there's also a purpose behind art. Pointless art is a pointless education. There has to be, art is not, any creator, anybody who creates anything will tell you that he did it for a reason. That reason is an education. We should try and use those reasons to serve our national interests. So thank you very much, TMC, for that comment. But I mean, some of the stuff that I was saying, maybe I could just respond to the comments with my own comment. In the documentary, I'm plugging the documentary here. But unfortunately, it's going to be delayed in release again. I thought it was going to be released as in last month, but it's going to be delayed again. I can't wait for people to see it. We tried to film in the British Museum when we were in London. We applied. Now, I think maybe our local fixer, was the person who was pushing the application. So it was a white person and a white organization. But the minute, maybe it's a coincidence, maybe that day the woman wasn't feeling well, but the minute that they showed up at the Nigerian film group, the police were not available anymore. Cannot So in the documentary, you will see me climbing the steps, and I go to the empty room. And that's about where I am. But I'll give you a secret. You wouldn't have noticed if I didn't tell you. But they just didn't let us film. And we wanted to even interview one of the board of governors. Her name, she's a famous lady, American lady, I'm saying it, it's not an accident, of the British Museum. I think she's just gone off the board of governors now. And, she's first of all responded positively, and then she said, no. She must have found out, no, she doesn't want, and we never got an interview from anybody, not because of anything, but we never got an interview. So there was many of these experiences that we found really harrowing. I was almost brought to tears when I saw my 16,000-year-old ancestor. I was almost brought to tears because I go to the Museum of Natural History. I go to all sorts of places, I've seen them from Old Dubai. I've seen them, but there was something special that this guy was from down the road, and he was hanging around here. And you know, for us to institutionally be told that didn't exist, so much so that with all due respect to the department, I'm not knocking the department in any way at all. Super guys, the fact that it's still there is to their credit.
Yes.
But for that to not be part of our national discourse, for Ministry of Information to release the history of Nigeria and to say that Lord Lugard did something about the nation, that's not. And that's what official material. That's what you get. The amalgamation by Lord Lugard. First of all, his name, it was not Lord Lugard. It was Captain Lugard at the time. So it was not Lord Lugard. Was never in Nigeria.
It was much later.
He was given that baron. He was made a baron in 1928, and he left Nigeria for over 10 years. He should stop. Not Lord Lugard. Captain, Mr. Lugard. You can tell I like him very much. So yeah, I think that's. I just want to share some personal anecdotes. I had goosebumps when I met this ancestor, because it was brought out for us and taken back after we left. You know, and in the documentary, I'm actually saying, "How you doing?" Obviously, he doesn't answer me.
I was going to ask you whether he greeted you.
We've reached our time. I'd like to say thank you very much to Chuka for one, writing the book, and two, spending this afternoon with us. I'd like to thank Loving Lagos for always being as hospitable and open as they always are. And I'd like to thank you all, physically and online, because this, what we are doing, if you didn't turn up, if you weren't on Zoom, we'd be talking to ourselves. So a round of applause for all of you. Thank you. And now, form an orderly queue, and he will sign books. Where are the books? How are you? He's asking how much I spent. Oh, you, when you get no. So you have your back in the US. How much
I'm telling you.
I have my POS.
How can I buy a book?
Hello, dear. How are you? I'm not here. Thank you. I tell you one thing.
Join the queue.
Is that the India was so tiny. I didn't know that. You know how we see.
Okay, ma'am.
Afternoon, Auntie. Hello, how are you? How's it going?
You forgot to, or you refused to take my calls.
I've been away. I traveled with this back and when did again? I'm spending more time outside of the
You said,
I was in the country.
oh really?